That single sentence, dripping with contempt, cut deeper than any slap ever could. $1,000? You woke me up for $1,000? Alex, you are less than a beggar. Beggars at least have the dignity to be quiet. The words hung in the air of the penthouse, as cold and sharp as the shards of the champagne flute I'd just dropped. The expensive crystal had exploded against the marble floor, but the sound was completely erased by the laughter that followed. It wasn't joyful laughter. It was a weapon, a sharp, cruel, percussive sound designed not just to mock a moment, but to dismantle a person. Marcus Thorne didn't even look at me as he spoke. His back was turned, his gaze fixed on the glittering New York skyline, as if surveying his personal kingdom. The ice in his glass clinked, a tiny, smug sound. "A startup?" he continued, his voice smooth and poisonous. "You? The guy who still uses the same brand of toothpaste he did in college because he's scared of a new flavor? You have the fire of a wet match, Alex. Stick to your spreadsheets. It's what you're built for. Leave the big ideas to the people who can actually afford to have them." I stood there, frozen. The cheap beer in my hand felt like a confession of everything I wasn't. A cold trickle of condensation ran down the bottle and onto my wrist, a pathetic echo of the shame heating my face. My shirt, an off-the-rack discount special, suddenly felt like a costume for a character nobody believed in. I had made a mistake, a huge one. In a rare, foolish burst of hope, I had shared my secret with him. For months, after my soul-crushing day job as a junior accountant, I'd been working. While Marcus was at fancy parties, I was in my tiny, cramped apartment, surrounded by notebooks and a second-hand laptop. I had an idea, a good one. I called it Ether Logistics. It was a simple but powerful concept, a smart, sustainable shipping network that used AI to help small businesses, the little guys, the forgotten ones, compete with the giants. I'd practiced the pitch for weeks, even saying it to my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I'd thought Marcus, my oldest friend, the boy I'd shared stolen beers with behind the school bleachers, would understand, or at least not actively destroy it. I was wrong. The laughter from his new friends, a collection of sleek, empty-looking people in clothes that cost more than my rent, washed over me. They laughed because he laughed. He was the sun in their solar system, and I was just a piece of space junk burning up in the atmosphere of his amusement. My throat tightened. The dream I'd so carefully built, the one thing that got me through the endless gray days of number crunching, lay in pieces at my feet, right next to the shattered glass. It wasn't just the idea he'd mocked. It was me. My ambition. My capability. My very right to try. I should go, I mumbled, the words barely audible. My face was on fire. Marcus finally turned around. A slow, pitying smile spread across his perfectly groomed face. He reached into his pocket, not for a handkerchief to help me clean up my mess, but for his wallet. He pulled out a thick stack of bills, held together by a gold money clip. "Here," he said, his voice dripping with fake generosity. He peeled off a few $100 bills and let them flutter onto the table near the broken glass. "For the cleaning, and for your, what did you call it? Your logistics. Maybe you can buy a better shirt. First impressions matter, you know." The silence that followed was worse than the laughter. It was an agreement, a unanimous verdict. I didn't pick up the money. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked out, leaving the echo of his voice and the sight of his smug face seared onto my brain. The ride down in the silent, mirrored elevator was the longest of my life. My reflection showed a pale, defeated man in a cheap suit, a man who believed he was nothing. But as I stepped out into the cool night air of the city, something else stirred beneath the humiliation. A cold, hard knot began to form in my gut. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger yet. It was a promise. Marcus Thorne had drawn a line in the sand. He'd placed himself on one side, a king on his throne, and put me on the other, in the dirt. I made a vow to myself, right there on the sidewalk, with the taxis blaring and the city's indifferent energy swirling around me. I would cross that line. I would build my own throne. And one day, Marcus Thorne would look at me not with pity, but with a respect that would feel like fear. He wanted a visionary? I would become one. The next 5 years were a blur of pure, unadulterated grind. I quit my safe, dead-end job the next morning. The terror was immense, a constant, cold companion. I sold my car. I moved out of my apartment and into a friend's damp basement, paying rent in favors and takeout pizza. The $1,000 I'd asked Marcus for? I eventually made it, but not by begging. I took any job I could find, freelance bookkeeping, data entry, even walking dogs. Every single penny went into ether. My apartment was a war room. The walls were covered in flowcharts, maps, and equations. I taught myself to code, my eyes burning from staring at lines of text in the dead of night. I learned about supply chains, fuel efficiency, AI, algorithms, and solar-powered warehouses. I lived on coffee and stubbornness. I reached out to every small business owner I could find. The struggling bookstore that couldn't afford shipping for online orders. The local artist trying to sell pottery. The family-owned farm with amazing organic produce that couldn't compete with the big grocery chains. I offered them my service at cost, sometimes even for free. I wasn't just building a company, I was building a community. I was one of them. I understood their struggle because it was my own. I became a ghost in my own life. No parties, no dates, no vacations. My world shrank to the size of my screen and the network of grateful, hopeful people I was helping. There were countless failures. A server crash that wiped out a week's work. A potential investor who laughed in my face, a haunting echo of Marcus. Days when I had exactly $3.27 in my bank account and a packet of stale ramen for dinner. But slowly, incredibly, it began to work. The AI routing system I'd painstakingly coded found efficiencies no big company had ever bothered to look for. We were faster, cheaper, and carbon neutral. The small businesses I helped started to thrive. And they talked. Word of mouth became my most powerful marketing tool. You gotta use Ether Logistics, the bookstore owner would tell the coffee roaster. This guy, Alex, he gets it. He's one of us. A year in, I managed to hire my first employee, Sarah, a fiercely intelligent and relentlessly optimistic engineer who believed in the mission. Then came Ben, a logistics wizard who saw the beauty in my chaotic system. We were a handful of misfits, working around the clock, fueled by a shared belief that we were building something that mattered. The breakthrough came in year 3. A popular online influencer, a woman who made handmade candles, made a viral video praising Ether. She detailed how we'd cut her shipping costs by half and her delivery times by a third. My phone exploded. The website crashed from the traffic. Overnight, we went from a scrappy secret to an industry sensation. Venture capitalists who had once slammed doors in my face were now blowing up my phone, offering obscene amounts of money. I was careful. I chose an investor who understood the vision, not just the profit margin. We scaled up, smartly, quickly. We moved from the basement to a real office, a bright, open space with plants and rescued dogs wandering around. The culture was built on the respect and hustle that I'd craved all those years ago. I made millions, then hundreds of millions. The financial newspapers called me the humble disruptor and the king of the little guys. I bought a nice apartment, a comfortable one with a view that, ironically, looked directly at Marcus's building. I didn't do it to show off. I did it to remember. Every morning I'd look at that glittering tower and feel the cold knot of determination tighten in my stomach. The boy in the cheap suit was gone. In his place was a man of quiet confidence. The hunger hadn't left. It had just been refined, focused like a laser. I'd achieved everything I'd set out to do, except for one thing. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office, looking over expansion plans into Europe, when Sarah walked in, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. "You need to see this," she said, placing a tablet on my desk. It was a financial news alert. "Thorn Industries in freefall," the headline screamed. I read the article, a slow smile spreading across my face. Marcus's company, a sprawling conglomerate built on luxury goods and old money arrogance, was collapsing. They'd overextended, made a series of disastrous investments, and were bleeding money. Their stock was in a death spiral. The article mentioned that their logistics division, the heart of their retail operation, was a particular disaster, inefficient, expensive, and environmentally catastrophic. It was their biggest weakness, and it was my area of expertise. Get me their full financials, I said, my voice calm. Every debt, every asset, every secret. I want to know everything. The hunt was on. It took my team 3 weeks to dissect the rotting carcass of Thorn Industries. Their logistics arm was even worse than reported, a bloated, outdated dinosaur. It was the anchor dragging the entire company under. And Marcus, in his arrogance, had personally guaranteed massive loans to keep it afloat. He was drowning, and he didn't have a life raft. But I had a fleet of ships. I made the calls. I quietly bought up every single piece of Thorn Industries' staggering debt that I could find. I became the ghost in his machine, the unknown creditor he was begging for more time. I could have bought the company outright 10 times over, but I didn't want to. I wanted him to come to me. I wanted him to ask. The day finally came. Another news alert. Thorn Industries announces emergency shareholder meeting. Last-ditch effort to avoid bankruptcy. I knew my invitation would be coming. It arrived by special courier, thick, cream-colored paper, with the embossed Thorn Industries logo. It was a request for me to attend as a potential strategic partner. The arrogance was still there, clinging on for dear life. They thought they could partner with me. They had no idea I already owned them. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully. I didn't choose one of my custom-made Italian suits. Instead, I put on a simple, well-tailored, but understated navy suit. I looked successful, but not ostentatious. Powerful, but not flashy. I was the anti-Marcus. My driver pulled up to the Thorn Industries building, a cold, imposing tower of steel and glass that screamed old money. The lobby was a cavern of silent anxiety. Nervous employees whispered in corners. The receptionist, her face pale, directed me to the top-floor boardroom. I walked in. The room was all dark wood and gloomy portraits of previous Thorns. The air was thick with despair and the smell of expensive coffee that no one was drinking. A dozen grim-faced men and women, the board of directors, sat around a massive table. And at the head of it was Marcus. He looked hollow. The easy confidence was gone, replaced by a twitchy exhaustion. His suit was still expensive, but it hung on him slightly. His eyes were shadowed. He was a king watching his castle burn. He didn't even look up as I entered. He was staring at a financial report as if it were his own death certificate. "Mr. Thorn," one of the board members said, his voice nervous. "The representative from Ether Holdings is here." Marcus finally looked up. His eyes, dull with fatigue, scanned the room and landed on me. There was a flicker of confusion. He saw a man he didn't recognize, a man of quiet authority. He saw a business rival. He did not see Alex from the basement. He gave a curt, dismissive nod. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit. As you can see, we're in the middle of a crisis. We're reviewing our options." His voice had lost its melodic cruelty. It was flat, raspy. I didn't sit. I walked slowly to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, directly facing him. I placed my simple leather folder on the table. "I'm aware of the situation, Marcus," I said, my voice even. The use of his first name made him flinch. His eyes narrowed, the confusion deepening. He looked at me closer, really looked this time, and then I saw it. The slow, dawning horror. The eyes. The set of the jaw. The ghost of the man he'd laughed out of his penthouse 5 years ago emerged from the face of the powerful stranger before him. His face lost all remaining color. "Alex?" The name was a whisper, a breath of disbelief. "Alex? Miller?" The board members looked between us, utterly bewildered. "It's been a long time," I said, a cold, calm smile touching my lips. 5 years, I believe. You told me to stick to my spreadsheets. I took your advice. I just built a better spreadsheet." The room was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Marcus just stared, his mouth slightly agape, his brain struggling to reconcile the two realities. I opened my folder. "Shall we discuss your options? Or rather, my options for you? You see, Thorn Industries' largest creditor is Ether Holdings. I own your debt. All of it." I let the words hang in the air, watching them sink into him, each one a hammer blow. "You," he stammered, his voice cracking. "You? How?" "It's simple," I said. my voice cutting through the tension in the room. "While you were throwing parties and pretending to be a king, I was building an empire. You built on sand. I built on steel." I laid out my terms. I wasn't there to partner. I was there to acquire. I would take control of Thorn Industries. I would dismantle his failed logistics division and replace it with my own, saving thousands of jobs in the process. I would save the company from ruin, but I would erase his name from it forever. The board listened, their initial shock turning to desperate relief. I was offering a lifeline. They didn't care who held the rope. Marcus listened in silent, trembling horror. He was being stripped of everything: his company, his legacy, his pride, by the man he'd called less than a beggar. When I finished, I looked directly at him. "The board has already agreed in principle. It's the only way to avoid total bankruptcy and a public scandal that would finish your family's name for good. The choice is yours, Marcus. Sign it over to me with a shred of dignity, or watch it burn. Either way, the outcome is the same." I slid the contract and a pen across the vast, polished table. It slid to a stop right in front of him. He looked down at the paper, then up at me. The arrogance was finally, completely gone. All that was left was a broken man facing his reckoning. The king was off his throne. His hand shook as he picked up the pen. He looked at the board members, who all looked away, unable to meet his eye. He had no allies left. He was utterly alone. He signed. The scratch of the pen was the only sound in the tomb-like silence. He dropped the pen as if it were red-hot and pushed the contract back toward me. His head bowed. I walked over, picked up the document, and glanced at his signature. It was done. "The cleaning," I said, my voice soft but carrying across the entire room. I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out a wallet. I pulled out a single, crisp $100 bill, the same denomination he'd thrown at me for the broken glass. I placed it gently on the table in front of him. "For the shirt," I said. "I believe first impressions matter." And without another word, I turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving the ghost of my past behind me forever. The door clicked shut, and I didn't need to look back to know that the man who had once had to bow to no one was now bowing under the weight of his defeat, finally understanding the price of his own contempt.